for February 5th. And what they do is before that time, they give you your own personal time to try to negotiate with the team. And in negotiations with the team, we found out that the fight isn't going to happen, for whatever reason, Jelena's team, decided that, she wasn't ready, or, I really don't know the details on that, but what happens in a situation like this where, because Amanda is the WBC interim champion, and we're mandatory for Jelena, if that fight doesn't go down and it's for a reason that, I guess the WBC, doesn't feel comfortable with, or for whatever reason, Amanda has been elevated to what?
Guys, I'm super excited to be part of the WBC organization. I am now the unified champion. It's bittersweet because there's nothing better than, of course, beating the champion. I actually wanted to fight Jelena. She actually has 2 of the belts, but now I have 2 of the belts. But it would have been sweet to fight her and beat her for those 2 belts. But no, it is what it is. They elevated me to the full champion. What am I supposed to say? No, take it back. But eventually I won that WBA title, so I have to fight Jelena whenever she's ready. We're up for it, and I just hope that, she's gonna come to take her title back. She wants her title back, so we have to fight for it. But I am super excited to be part of the WBC family now.
I think that this news is exactly as Amanda Serrano describes it. It's bittersweet that this is how she came to procure the green belt at 126 pounds. In truth, this really is no substitute to what that unification match would have meant for the division, as there would have been 3 of the 4 major titles at this weight on the line. And as it stands, consolidation really hasn't been brought to the division as a result of this development. Jelena's still a champion. She's just not in possession of the green belt. She's still got the black and gold one.
And there were still 3 world champions at this weight.
That way, this can't be categorized as the process of elimination, as no actual world champion has been eliminated at all. You could categorize this as
what?
Moving the furniture in the featherweight division, as opposed to establishing an authority, a singular champion in possession of all the belts.
This isn't Amanda's fault,
It really isn't. She can't be blamed for what's happening here. I understand that there are a lot of people out there that still feel raw about how things with Katie Taylor went. I get that. Some of them might even look at this as karma, that, well, you bailed on the super fight with Katie Taylor, and now Jelena bailed on the super fight with you.
Goes around, comes around.
I can already see the faces of those teeming masses and their unsympathetic ears, unsympathetic expressions at this news. It's supposed to be the alternative to a super fight with Katie Taylor, and that alternative has fallen by the wayside for whatever reason. And even though this is not Amanda Serrano's fault, it's all the same.
What goes around comes around.
I am disappointed. I have to admit that. I am disappointed that Jelena decided not to go through with this thing for whatever reason. We don't actually have Jelena's side of the story. We don't know why she decided to surrender her WBC title to Amanda Serrano.
We don't.
What's stopping this fight from happening? Jelena is already a very accomplished fighter, having been in the sport for many, many years, fought in wars, solid matchups of her own. She was this division's only unified champion here today in 2021. And the hierarchy of thought was, at least for me, that if Jelena's still sticking around, it's got to be to unified titles. It's got to shoot for undisputed, because she's done pretty much everything else. More or less.
Yeah.
Outside of becoming an undisputed champion. I figured, she hired Jonathan Banks to be her new head trainer. Maybe all of this is preparation for an Amanda Serrano fight, but when push came to shove, she coughed up the belt. And we can't blame Amanda for that. Jelena Mrdjenovich has been classified by the WBC as an emeritus champion, and what that designation signifies is that As soon as Jelena wants to challenge Amanda for the WBC title, Amanda has to oblige her.
I thought that was only for champions that retire.
Come on, be serious. When has anything that the alphabet's ever done made sense?
Gonna start relying on the WBC to stick to their word now?
Jelena Mrdjenovich still is a reigning champion. That's the way this all breaks down. And in spite of Amanda bringing herself one step closer to becoming this division's undisputed champion, actual consolidation hasn't been brought to the division as a result of this development. There are still 3 world champions here. I wonder that Jelena isn't passing on the Amanda Serrano fight to pursue the Sarah Mahfoud fight. Tell you something, not all unification matches are created equal. Yes, I could go for Mrdjenovich versus Mahfoud the same as I could go for Mrdjenovich versus Serrano. The difference is the level of risks involved. You're not facing in Sarah Mahfoud what you would be facing in Amanda Serrano.
Is Jelena gonna go after Sarah?
Now, with this development, we received confirmation of a previous scenario I specified. A few days ago, there was a report published indicating that Amanda was in the process of finalizing a fight with Daniela Bermudez. The fight was classified a unification match, and I talked about how the only way you have a unification match at featherweight between Amanda and Daniela is if, one of the titles at the weight has been vacated. One of the titles has been relinquished. That does appear to be the case here. I'm still ambivalent about that fight, how I feel about that fight, that, Daniela's prescribed weights are 118 and 122 at 126. I don't know how effective she is. I don't know if she's cut out the campaign there.
But it does look like they're gonna fight.
If they fight, and by some chance, Daniela Bermudez should lose the fight, I wonder that this won't affect her status as a champion at 122 and her status as a champion at 118, as Daniela Bermudez holds the WBO title at 118 pounds and the IBF title at 122 pounds. If she loses to Amanda at 126, is that going to affect her status as a champion at those weights? Too soon to tell, don't really know.
But just like Amanda said, this news is bittersweet.
It is, because I was hoping to see that fight come into fruition, and in light of this development, I don't really know that it ever will. I don't really know what's next for Jelena Mrdjenovich. I'm assuming that maybe she'll target Sarah Mahfoud, and if she doesn't, who really knows? I guess the most I can do is congratulate Amanda Serrano for attempting to bring a unification match to this weight. I reiterate, this development is not her fault. It is what it is. In other news, per tweet from Michael Benson, Teofimo Lopez on Floyd Mayweather Jr. wanting exhibitions versus Logan Paul, Jake Paul, and 50 Cent, is quoted as saying, "Floyd, man, you're ruining your legacy. It's a damn shame to see it all happen like that. I love Floyd, man. I looked up to him. He did a huge thing." And I'm a little ambivalent about that statement, I am. I mean, is Floyd Mayweather Jr. actually hurting his own legacy by participating in these cash grab fights, these exhibition matches against celebrity personas? Is that what he's really doing? Is he hurting what he's done as a professional boxer, the legacy that he's amassed, by participating in these exhibition matches in his retirement? I don't think so. I don't really look at it that way. The only way I could see one of these are circus fights. Taking something away from Floyd's legacy is if the circus fight were to go sideways for him. And given who he's challenging, or whatever it is, sharing the ring with, there's not much chance of that happening. There's not much chance of a Logan Paul or a Jake Paul or a 50 Cent even. There's not much chance of one of those guys beating Floyd Mayweather Jr. in the squared circle. There just isn't. That's the only real way I could see those engagements taking something away from who Floyd Mayweather Jr. was as a boxer. That aside, it's obvious what the motivation for those exhibition matches is. It's cash grab.
That's it.
And Floyd Mayweather Jr. is hardly the first retired boxer, retired or otherwise. He's hardly the first guy to participate in one of those.
If the shoe was on the other foot, how would Teofimo react?
If the shoe was on the other foot, how would most professional boxers react at the prospect of making vast sums of money from what are exhibition matches? Exhibition matches taking place after these professional boxers retire. How would most professional boxers react to those propositions, to those situations? I think what Teofimo Lopez will find is that in those situations, most guys would opt to do what Floyd Mayweather Jr. is opting to do. I'm in no way, shape, or form encouraging more fighters to participate in more circus fights. I'm just calling a spade a spade. If you put up the kind of money that Floyd stands to make from these circus fights, if you put that kind of money up for most of these other boxers that are out there,
They're gonna do what Floyd's doing.
they are. And in that way, I'm not sure that he's actually hurting his legacy by participating in these circus fights. These circus fights that, you know what, they are annoying. There is a bit of frivolity to them, though I don't actually know if they're taking anything away from Floyd Mayweather Jr.'s legacy. I mean, look at the criticism that he faced ahead of the Conor McGregor crossover fight. Look at that criticism, and then look at what happened afterward.
What?
Manny Pacquiao was all set to do the exact same thing that Floyd Mayweather Jr. had already done. Had Conor McGregor not lost that fight in the octagon to Dustin Poirier, he was all set to have a crossover fight with Conroy the same way that Floyd had a crossover fight with Conroy.
Nobody said that Manny was hurting his legacy by doing it.
Situation with Jake and Logan, that is a little different because Jake and Logan, these guys aren't real fighters. These guys aren't real pugilists per se. But I see a situation with those engagements to where if the receipts come back and the numbers are encouraging, more boxers would be taking cues from what Floyd Mayweather Jr. did, the same way that, Manny Pacquiao took his cues from Floyd Mayweather with the Conroy fight.
If the money's good enough, they'll do it.
So is he really hurting his legacy? I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that statement. And finally, just a follow up on a story we touched on in a previous video. The Jermall Charlo told Dave Benavidez, "You've got to get vaccinated for me to fight you."
Oh, and he's got to be 25 years old, too.
Jermall Charlo was quoted as saying, "Get that David Benavidez on the line. I've been trying to call him, but he hasn't answered. Someone tell Benavidez to call me right now, and we'll set this shit up." Went on to say, "They don't want to fight me. That's a little boy," Jermall said of the 24-year-old David Benavidez. What is he, 23, 24? I'll hit him with some shit he never seen before. You motherfuckers are retarded. Remember the shit that happened with Erickson Lubin? The motherfucker was too young and too dumb. He ran right into that shit from Jermall's twin brother, Jermell Charlo. It snapped his motherfucking neck. He, Benavidez, could be my son. I could raise you. They're kids. I'm not fighting nobody under 25. Not fighting nobody.
Buddy under 25, huh?
And I'm not fighting nobody that don't get the COVID vaccination. If you don't get the vaccination, I'm not fighting you. You have to get vaccinated for me to fight you. Boxing is already watered down. You want me to be watered down, broke and sick? Hell no. Y'all gotta take the vaccination.
Is that really such an outlandish request?
I mean, in today's postmodern era of boxing and what is the new normal for all of us,
Is that too much to ask?
I don't think that it's as outlandish a request as it might seem, as it might sound initially. It's just that regardless of how much sense that bit of it makes, getting a COVID-19 vaccine in order to stage a fight, upon further review, maybe that makes a bit of sense, but that's really not what you expect to hear from a fighter who's looking for a fight, you understand. It's not necessarily in keeping with the kind of jargon you would expect to hear from a guy who's looking to have a fight. It seems more like an obstacle, a barrier being put in front of the match potentially taking place. That and this requisite that David Benavidez have another birthday party
Before Jamal gives him the time of day.
before Jermall decides to have a fight with him. Though if that's the case, then why are you even calling this guy out? Why are you even addressing this guy? This kind of indecisiveness is not in keeping with a fight that a fighter is pursuing. It sounds to me like Jermall Charlo just can't make up his fucking mind what it is he wants to do. Do you want to fight this guy or not? 1 minute you're telling everybody about how you're going to knock this guy out, and the next minute you're giving reasons why the fight shouldn't happen. That really is the way it all breaks down. That kind of petulant behavior really isn't in keeping with a fighter that's pursuing a fight, and it's really not in keeping with the character, the portrayal of himself that Jermall Charlo is attempting to give off, as if he is far too maturated a fighter to take on David Benavidez. I didn't see Anthony Durrell protesting a David Benavidez fight, and Anthony Durrell's an older guy than Jermall Charlo, but, he climbed in the ring with him. He had the fight.
So what the hell are you so worried about?
And that's why these seem like roadblocks, obstacles that Jermall Charlo is setting up. Roadblocks he's setting up preemptively to sabotage the fight before it even happens. That's why all of this reads like a checklist of excuses to stop the fight from happening. He's got to get a COVID-19 vaccine, and he's got to have another birthday, bring 2 forms of ID, his birth certificate,
Documentation of his billing address.
proof of insurance, a notarized letter from his mechanic, and any religious leaders in his neighborhood. I mean, how long does the checklist get before Jermall Charlo just casts all of that crap aside and says, you know what, I'm going to move up for this guy because it's not like I'm doing a whole lot in the middleweight division.
We talked about that in the previous video.
There's not much chance of Jermall Charlo participating in a unification match at 160 pounds. There really isn't much chance of that happening. Doesn't seem interested in Andrade. I don't think the people over there at the PBC can afford to flip the bill to get Gennady Golovkin to come to them.
They can't.
Not that he seems all that interested in fighting Jermall, because he doesn't, but better still, even if he did, we know how things work. We know how these political boundary lines, they do affect what fights do and don't happen. I don't think they can afford to get Gennady Golovkin to come to them. Moreover, I don't think they're willing to send Jermall Charlo to him. I don't think they're willing to send Jermall Charlo across the street for a fight like that, even though that would be the biggest fight of Jermall Charlo's career.
Unification matches at 160 aren't likely to happen.
So why not fight David Benavidez? What the fuck are you doing at 160 pounds that's so fucking important that you can't just move up and fight this guy?
Jermall says boxing's watered down.
Yeah, it is. It is watered down, and that's mostly because of guys like him. Guys like him who won't unify with Demetrius Andrade. Guys who'd likely let politics get in the way of a Gennady Golovkin fight. Guys who rather sit there and worry about a guy's age and his COVID-19 status.
What?
Whether or not he's vaccinated, as opposed to just, moving up and having the fight. Boxing's watered down because of fighters like Jermall Charlo.
Looks like he's searching for a way out.
Searching for a way to not fight David Benavidez, even though he should.